Hey everybody, welcome back to the Turnout. I am your host Aloy, and I just actually got done watching the series soft finale for the second season of Charmed. If you weren't aware, basically this whole virus issue made them stop filming midway through episode 20, which means 19, which is the one we're going over today, Unsafe Space, is the last one that they were able to actually complete filming on before they had to kind of shut down all of the production. And that's fair. As much as I love the show, obviously I want everybody to be safe, but seeing as this is kind of our soft finale and the final 3 episodes we will see at some later date, I definitely wanted to be a little bit more diligent with my notes on this, and by more diligent with my notes, I mean I made actual notes. I also want to say that I have recorded a few other videos that just need to kind of get edited, and I will have those out to you soon, but, kind of going into, the summer, and we're not going to have as much Charm to talk about. I really hope that some of you are going to stick around and look at some of my non-Charm stuff, because I actually talk about a lot of other things. So with all that in mind, going into this episode, I want to say that it was actually really nice to see Swan. She kind of started the episode off, and I thought that that was really nice because it had been a few episodes since we've seen her. That's what I've noticed about this show, is that you end up with these characters that you see and you're like, oh hey, yeah, that character, and then it reminds you that you're like, oh, I haven't seen them in like forever. So
as assistant manager, I must tell you that hidden cameras are privacy violation, not to mention microaggression.
So there's that, and then it jumps to the house where Macy is in full effect, so, there's some bumping uglies going on, and, it's actually kind of cute. I think that they're kind of a cute couple. I know that I was always kind of anti-Macy. I was kind of hoping that they wouldn't go in that direction, mostly because I saw it as a departure from the original, and I was like, well, they don't have to have one of the witches fall in love with the White Lighter, do they? So, I guess we'll just handle that. But, they are interrupted by urgent alerts from Swan, because Swan texted Maggie and was like, hey, they're putting up cameras and all this stuff, and it's making it a not safe space, and found out that from pictures that they're magic detectors. So Julian and his aunt are actually, they're coming after the Charmed ones. They are trying to find them. And obviously they know what they're after. They're after, because they're drilling down and down and down and down, and what's underneath safe space. The sacred tree, black amber, that's the thing that they're using to bring people back to life. It's there. Like, the plot is writing itself at this point. Well, I guess it's not. I guess they wrote it, but still, the plot is pretty obvious at this point. And this is kind of interesting because they're like, all right, well, we can't go into safe space anymore, and there's important things in there that we need, so the only one that we can trust and that we can contact is Jimmy. And I'm like, why not? Why aren't you calling Jordan? Jordan, nobody's gonna suspect Jordan. Jordan can totally go into safe space and, give him the magic words, and he can open up the door and go in, and he can get you guys a marble, and then you guys can get in. Like, he seems the obvious person to call. Then it kind of turns into kind of like multiple plot. So in order for them to get back into safe space, they need a few different things. They need a marble that can take them in, and they need, obviously, they want to get the skeleton key so that they can actually unlock Jimmy from his bottle without having the command token that gives them, absolute command over them. I thought that this was pretty interesting because they go in to get Celeste, and Celeste goes with Harry to Castle Braith to go get the skeleton key, and I think it's pretty interesting. It's not like super deep or anything. Like, they kind of have a conversation about him being with Macy and saying like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. There's a reason why we set it up this way, that you're not supposed to fall in love with them. And yeah, we made some bad choices along the way, but seriously, it's a bad idea, and it actually kind of gets Harry thinking about, maybe I don't want to be in a relationship with Macy, because of course, as I said in the last episode, the moment that you introduce a love interest and they're actually finally together, you now have to introduce a reason for them not to be together. And there you go. Like, that's storytelling 101. Overall, their storyline of digging through the remains of Castle Braith, not super duper interesting, but they do have that kind of back and forth. However, what they do find out is that even though they don't have any marbles to get back into safe space, which was actually a big thing with the last episode, it was like, oh, well, why don't you just use a marble to get back? It's like, oh, because they hadn't produced one to leave it, they just left it. So that was, since they weren't using the marbles to come in and out all the time, they didn't actually have one on them, so now it was kind of hard for them to do that. So I was like, okay, let's see what they can do here. Celeste says that there's a subreddit where they can find out the location of ex-witches that might have a marble that they can use to take them through. And I was like, okay, that's like humorous and everything, and I thought it was pretty nice. Then we cut to Julian and his aunt. Julian and his aunt are talking, and she's kind of gently bringing him over to the dark side and making him, you know, question his ability to like trust Macy and, you know, all this junk. But they start drilling through the wall that leads to the safe space, the sanctuary underneath safe space, and the wall keeps repairing itself, which it's actually pretty cool. So essentially the whole storyline with Julian and his aunt is we keep getting more and more glimpses of how he is generally a good person who is trying to do all of this for good reasons, and his aunt is kind of steering him in the wrong direction. I think that part was done pretty well, except for one part of it where they immediately jump to the past for some reason, and I was like, whoa, where did that jump come from? Like, whoa. It was very jarring and it wasn't well set up, so it was kind of weird. But I think that they did a pretty good job, and then in the end, she convinced him to kind of go along with her plan, and they're going to go after the Charmed Ones. One of the things during that conversation, I'm kind of jumping around because now I'm kind of jumping to the end. One of the conversation pieces, though, that his aunt said to Julian was like,
has it never occurred to you that maybe Macy is the one who was using you? Who's to say that she hasn't known who you were all along?
How do you know that Macy hasn't been using you this whole time? And I'm like, I knew that heist episode was going to come back to haunt them, because that's exactly what they were doing. They were using her relationship with Julian in order to get the thing that they needed. Of course, this whole thing happens around the time that Macy's like, I'm gonna break up with Julian and tell Harry how much I love him. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. She tries to break up with Julian and kind of doesn't. And that actually gives her an end. They go to the party on his invite. And she's kind of pretending to be there with him and be kind of into him. But in the end, that relationship is also a reason why they're able to kind of get away with it, because he actually does catch them, and she's like, oh, I have such a headache, I don't remember anything. And it's like, okay, only somebody who's in love would fall for that, because she was doing a very bad job at lying. And it became pretty obvious to me while watching that episode that, oh, that's definitely gonna bite them on the butt. So he definitely had ample reason to believe that he was being used, in my opinion. The big thing that we find out, though, is that he really was doing it to save his sister, which I also called. His sister, I thought his sister was dead, but apparently his sister was in a coma. So they're using the black amber to bring her out of that coma, or she was dead and they used it to put her into a coma, and then now they're using more of it to bring her out of a coma, but only for a minute. And then they're like, well, we need more of this in order to bring her back to life for good. And it's like, oh man, well that's really good fuel for motivation. So, I mean, again, like, I'm kind of behind Julian. Like, he's doing it for an altruistic reason. His aunt, on the other hand, is the one who's kind of being manipulative here and trying to bring it to a darker place. Like, in the flashback was them kind of gaining control of Jimmy, and she was the first one to grab the disc that gives ultimate master control, and like, so she's been kind of the evil one. So I think she's really the big bad. Julian is more led astray by her.
I am your master now.
So jumping around here, so the Charmed Ones go to the party that is a bar that has all the ex-witches in it, and they run into Ruby. And Mel's like, hey, Ruby. And I was sitting there like, okay, Ruby. That's the bartender that they had like one date, and she was like in 2 episodes, maybe like 10 episodes ago. This was also, again, kind of like with Swan and kind of like with Jordan, kind of like with everybody, definitely Kat in the earlier part of the season, but they write in these characters and then they forget about them, and it makes me forget about them too, so I'm glad that I guess have at least a little bit of a memory. But I was like, okay, I guess she's an ex-witch. All right. They get her marble, but they misunderstood Celeste, because Celeste said that she needs to bring them through using the marble, but they just took the marble, and that means that they're trapped. So then they end up having to go get Ruby, and then she helps him out in the end anyway. So it's like whatever, but it just kind of extends the storyline, I think, a little bit, and kind of creates this kind of like, ooh, is Mel gonna get with Ruby? Which honestly makes me think even more that Ruby was a replacement for Kat. Like, I think possibly the actress, I'm gonna have to look into this, but possibly the actress who played Kat maybe had another prior engagement that she needed to leave and go do, and that's why she was written off, because Ruby is basically doing all the stuff that probably they could have used Kat to do. Or vice versa, like don't even have Kat in there and just have Ruby in there, and she could have served the same purpose. I mean, I guess except she wouldn't have owned a magic store. I mean, I could see ways to combine those two characters into a single character without having to like retread a bunch of romantic water with Mel. I also think that Mel and Ruby have actual chemistry between them, whereas I never felt that with Kat. So going back to the conversation between Celeste and Harry, they did actually reveal one thing. I know I said it was very unimportant, but they did reveal one thing, and that is that there's the legend of the Conqueror.
That old fairy tale?
According to legend, magic existed everywhere. And there was an ancient being called the Conqueror who tried to steal it all for himself.
That drained the world of magic and like killed all magic. And they believe it's Julian, but again, I think it's the aunt, is going to be the next coming, the second coming of the Conqueror. And I'm like, that's an interesting thing to kind of reveal so far after the fact here. Like, there's the demon overlord, and there's the master, and now there's the Conqueror, and I think there's so many big bads to like in legend and stuff that we're grasping at straws here. It's a little weird to just now be introducing another one just so close to the ending of the season. So they do get to the sanctuary, they release Jimmy, there's a big Jimmy-Harry fight, which I found pretty funny because it was like, hey, as soon as we release him, make sure you don't move out of the circle, and then Jimmy comes out and punches Harry right in the face and he gets thrown out of the circle, which I thought was hilarious. But in the end, they were able to kind of release Jimmy, and Jimmy like got stopped by Ruby, who used a little bit of magic. And that was kind of weird too, because I think if you do witchness protection, you like shouldn't be allowed to use magic anymore, so it seems weird that she was. But I think it's going to end up leading to them getting a little bit of help from Jimmy to go ahead and take down Julian and his aunt. But to put a bow on a few of these different storylines, Harry decides that he doesn't want to care about Macy because their relationship is making him act differently. So he goes to Maggie and asks, can you remove my affection for Macy? Which, okay, hold on. We know that Maggie can push her own emotion out to other people. We don't know if she can manipulate other people and like remove emotion entirely. Also, you have to imagine that these effects will only be temporary, so that's also a weird request. I mean, because like she did it once before on a couple of guards who then got her anger and started fighting. Are you telling me that that does not wear off and they are just continuously angry and fighting with each other now for eternity? I doubt it. So I think that was a little weird without establishing possibly duration of abilities and the full scope of what she's able to do with that. Because yeah, that was a big leap of logic without showing. Like, you're kind of just telling us and you haven't shown us that that's a possibility, so that was a little weird. Ruby says, I want to be part of your world but not the magic part. Mel's like, well, I mean, the magic part is pretty much all of it, and I'm like, oh, I mean, that's kind of true. So that was a little weird too, that they're kind of coming to like they're getting together and they're like, I think that we're gonna try this even though it seems doomed to fail. So I'm going to go ahead and try to conclude this video here. It's kind of crappy that this ended up being the last episode, because this is very much a building episode. It was building up to something. There was a lot of moving parts in this episode, but none of them were like largely actionable. So I'm a little disappointed with this being the last one for a while. I wish that maybe there was something a little bit bigger, maybe a final fight with Godric or something involving the demon world. I know Abby's gone, so I mean, I guess we're just supposed to forget about Abby now, even though Abby is living with them, which seemed odd to me as well. She's just nowhere, even though she's staying with them. So this one is it's not a bad episode. If this was anything other than the soft finale, I would have been like, oh, this is a good episode, I can't wait for the next one. But now that like we don't even know when the next one is coming, Ooh, like this one's gonna be a harsh one. But I think that the episode overall was really well done, especially the scenes with Julian and his aunt. I think that it was nice to see Macy, but again, I called it that they were obviously going to now put some sort of bridge between them, or not bridge, a chasm between them, if you will. So I'm interested to see what they do, and I can't wait for the show to come back. What did you guys think of this episode? Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments. Let's continue the discussion. Also, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification. Otherwise, I've been your host, Aloy. This has been the Turnout. Thanks for showing up.